And this year, for the first time, Pauly, am I wrong on this? I think for the first time in a long time that you can say and make the case for a lot of teams to actually make the college football playoff. I know TCU made it last year. I'm talking about right now in August, September to try to find like good betting opportunities and teams to make it. Like our former producer, Dustin, who's now on an afternoon show, he had TCU to make the playoff, I think, or to win the whole thing at like 80-1. He'd bet him in early November. I don't know very many other people who had TCU to either make the playoff or to, win the national championship last year.
Yeah. So certainly a lot of people could have predicted Georgia and Ohio State. But this is, I agree with you that this is wide open. Because do you really trust like a Texas? Do you trust Clemson? Certainly you can't trust the Pac-12 with USC and how they blew it last year. And even do you want to get there and take a shot with a Washington or someone like that? So maybe 2 from the Big Ten. Definitely, you got to make certainly Georgia, odds-on favorite should be to make the playoff. But do you trust LSU? And do you just say, well, okay, it's a, quote, down year for Alabama and Saban. You can't dismiss Alabama. You figure they're just whoever's playing quarterback will be good enough.
Yeah, I think there's a very good chance that we get 2 teams out of the Big Ten. Georgia's schedule is one of the easiest in the entire schedule. But other than that, with the SEC anyway, you brought up LSU, and I've heard a lot of people make the case for this team to make the playoff this year. Are they going to be 11-1 or 12-0 and going to the SEC title game? Because with 2 losses, we've seen this teams cannot get into the playoff with 2 losses. So I'm done trying to make the case for a team that has 10 wins and 2 losses on the year.
Could happen this year, though. Don't you think?
I don't.
No?
I don't
I'd like
think
to
so.
see a prop on that if they put that up.
So LSU, they play Florida State, they're at Miss State, they're at Ole Miss, they're at Alabama. They get Florida at home, they play Texas A&M at home as well. That is 5 or 6 games right there that it's going to be difficult to accomplish. And everybody just, blindly picking this team to go to Alabama and beat them in early November, that's easier said than done. And they might lose to Florida State to begin. So can they make it? Sure. It's also a difficult schedule. The Alabama schedule is not any easier. I mean, they have to avoid losing to Texas in week number 2. Their road games are at Miss State, at A&M, the Iron Bowl. They get Arkansas, Tennessee, and LSU at home. And if the quarterback's a question mark, then you could see this team potentially losing a couple of times. But they are loaded everywhere other than that question mark at quarterback. I think Michigan, they're plus 345 to have an undefeated regular season. I don't love that bet because they still have to go play like at Penn State. But overall, I mean, the Michigan schedule, Paul, they're non-conference. They'll win by a combined 100 points. I mean, they get East Carolina, UNLV, and Bowling Green at home before they begin the Big Ten slate with Rutgers. Their road games in the Big Ten this year are Nebraska and Minnesota back-to-back weeks. They get Michigan State. They're at Penn State, which is going to be tricky. But I think they take care of Ohio State again at home this year. I think Michigan to make the playoff at basically it's even money or minus 105. I think that's a really good bet because I have them losing 1 game, and that would be the Penn State game. But even if they don't lose that, I don't think they're going to lose another one. So even if they lose that game and beat Ohio State, I know Penn State in theory could run the table and make it out of that side of the Big Ten and make the playoff. I'm very high on Michigan this year. And the job that Jim Harbaugh has done has been exceptional. I mean, this guy was basically dead to rights for his job a couple of years ago, and it completely flipped. And he's been bringing in monsters ever since, and they have a lot of talent. And now look at how that series, by the way, has turned around against the Buckeyes.
Yeah. He's got to do a better job in the playoff, though. It's been ugly the last couple of years.
Well, that's neither here nor that's. I would agree with that, but I'm talking about just to get to the playoff.
Yes, yeah.
Know?
All these teams play each other, though, too. I mean, that's why it's fascinating. You have the marquee Alabama-Texas game. You have that LSU-Florida State game to start that Sunday night game. Are you buying Clemson? What's their record? Do they only have 1 loss? What's going to happen in the Pac-12? I mean, this is I do think you can make a case for a lot of teams, but then again, to your point, nobody had TCU. So that was refreshing for college football because it was so much of just the same damn teams every year making the playoff. And then, of course, it's a whole completely, this is the final year we have it. Completely different ball game next year now when we go to 12.
Yeah, I do like Clemson this year. I don't think they have a lot of roadblocks in their way. They get FSU at home. They play at Miami. That's a team that I absolutely have to see it to believe it.
No, right.
Before I say anything positive about Miami whatsoever. They get Notre Dame and North Carolina at home. They close at South Carolina. Now, that could be a landmine for sure. We saw it happen last year when Spencer Rattler closed the season really well for the Gamecocks, and they were upsetting everybody. But I think that that's a relatively, they catch a break with the schedule. Florida State, they get LSU, and they play at Clemson and at Florida. Other than that, they can navigate it. And I know what you said about the Pac-12, and I can't disagree. And I'm looking at USC's schedule, Paul. They have to play at Notre Dame. They get Utah, Washington, and UCLA at home. They play at Oregon. And this Washington team is absolutely loaded to the gills. But how does this team avoid losing 2 games? They play at Sparty. I'm telling you, I live and breathe. The game at Arizona is going to be tricky. They get Oregon at home. They're at USC. They play at Oregon State. You don't think that's going to be difficult? They get Utah at home. So these teams out of the Pac-12, you're looking at the USC schedule right now, and you know the talent. They're going to score 40-plus a game, and Caleb Williams is going to be ridiculous, and Lincoln Riley's going to come across as the best play caller in the country yet again. But this conference never makes any sense, and that's why they'll stumble. They'll stub their toe one of these stupid weeks when they shouldn't.
And they do it to themselves. So to answer your question, you could get to maybe 9 or 10. Can make the case for teams to make the playoff.
I think so.
But how many do you trust? That's a whole other question entirely. But
I don't trust Oklahoma.
Well, you can't, well, I trust Oklahoma more than Penn State. I can't. Franklin in a big game. No way.
That's
no
true.
way I can get there. And which I reached out to Chris Felica, and not that he thinks it's going to happen, but he did point out that when Gabriel was in there, Oklahoma had a lot of close losses. Mm-hmm. Venables has got to fix the defense, which was so bad last year as well. But that's the big if too. I mean, what if USC actually has an average defense? Well, then watch out, and they'll be in this thing. And they should have been in it last year. But they have an excellent case to do it because they're just going to score so many points, and they have likely the number 1 pick in the draft at quarterback. I think Washington's a little aggressive with their schedule. But again, to your point, it's just they find a way to mess this up every year with this conference.
Yeah. The Pac-12 does, and typically so does the Big 12. And again, the Texas hype now, I mean, it's 9.5 with the win total. Over, I think the last time I saw was minus 140.
Well, yeah, right. That's even if they go over you're right. Are we going to see a 2-loss team, though? But that's, you can go over your win total, but are they going to, strong schedule, but are they going to put you in at 10-2?
Yeah. I don't know if they get, do you think they get to 10 wins?
No, I don't. But, certainly brand name bias could factor in, and I could see an 11-2 Texas maybe getting in. Because certainly you're talking maybe about a win over Alabama non-conference, and then what you do in the conference with some tough games, and a lot of people high on K-State. Yeah. But I mean, come on. So what has Sark accomplished?
That's the thing. And again, knowing how this conference operates, and I think they're a little bit too hyped this year with the expectations. They're going to lose at least 2 games. My question is, are they going to lose a third one? At Alabama, they're catching 7 points in week 2. And then some of the road games they play, they're at Baylor. They play at TCU later in the year. They're at Iowa State. They get OU, of course, on a neutral, as they do every single year, and they play K-State at home. That team's going to go 11-1 and make the Big 12 title game. And with the win, they're going to. I don't think that's happening. Like, that's a team I can't bet on. And I doubt the Big 12 will actually get a team in the playoff this year. And maybe I'm wrong, and maybe this is the year it pops for Sark.
Wow.
But I think a lot of these teams that we brought up, you can. Like, I think that you can make a case for Florida State or Clemson. Like, the winner of that game, I think, is going to be in pretty good shape if Florida State can beat LSU. It
would be Big Ten against SEC with the 4. And I also, with conference realignment and the expanded playoff, you're seeing schools getting very aggressive in the non-conference and playing a lot of difficult opponents, too.
Which
is
great.
Great for the sport.
Yep. The Ohio State schedule, they have to survive at Notre Dame. They get Penn State at home. They play at Wisconsin and at Michigan. Like, it's a pretty tough 4-game, pretty tough overall 4 games on the schedule for the Buckeyes, with 3 of those being on the road. And the question, of course, at quarterback, but loaded pretty much everywhere else. So it's a fun discussion. My bet's probably going to end up being on Michigan to make the playoff this year. I like them quite a bit.
Visit VSiN.com to get current odds, listen for free, find showtimes, and download VSiN sports betting podcasts.